Year 10, it's Friday, as promised. I'll make this video to try and help us sort of nail this essay. Right, first things first, what is the question asking you? Attitudes in society were the most important factor influencing how criminal activity was dealt with. Well, this means, if that's the most important factor according to this statement, you're going to have to do a paragraph on attitudes in society. What does influencing mean, though? If you're influenced by something, it's changed the direction of your life. And that's what it really is to do with change. So we're trying to think about what sort of things have changed how we've tried to deal with the problem of criminal activity. And dealing with it is law enforcement. So one way we try to deal with it is we try to stop it in the first place. And then we try to catch criminals, that's law enforcement. And punishments is another way we try to deal with criminal activity. And it's over those 500 years. So you have to do a paragraph on how attitudes changed. And if I was doing a paragraph on how attitudes changed, one of the things I might talk about is to give an example of how attitudes have affected how criminal activity is dealt with, is the death penalty. There's two aspects to this. We ended public executions in 1867, and there were a few reasons for this. Attitudes among the ruling classes, well, attitudes have become, it was more important to keep the poor in control, the masses in control, than it was to let them come to these big public executions where things could get rowdy and a little bit out of hand. The spectre of the French Revolution was casting a shadow, it's a good little phrase that, over the ruling classes. And it was making them worry a little bit. But also, it became less acceptable to do public executions. Important people like Charles Dickens were writing things saying that it shouldn't be coming to a fair to watch somebody die. It's just animal. It's not the right thing to do. So attitudes had changed and that became no longer acceptable and it ended. Similar within 1965, you mentioned cases like Derek Bentley, Timothy Evans, Ruth Ellis, things you might have remembered learning about from year 9. Because of those causes, it changed public perception. Because of these famous cases, people started to think we should no longer be having the death penalty. Prison reform. Well, what did John Howard and the other lady do? She called Elizabeth Fry. They raised awareness of the state of prisons. So it no longer was acceptable to have prisons in the way that they were because people were in uproar about the state of prisons. So therefore, prisons changed. And the formation of the police. People did not want the police for a variety of reasons, but by the 1800s, the ruling classes, the ones who can actually change society and laws and things like that, their attitude had changed to one where it was, we need a police force to keep the population in check. There was an exploding population, there was an increasing crime rate, and they needed something to keep that in check, as well as still this spectre of the French Revolution casting a shadow over the ruling classes, making them nervous a little bit. So these are the sorts of things I'd write about in terms of changing attitudes. There's so many more. You just look at that sheet I've given you. If you don't understand what I'm talking about with any of those examples, there's so many examples of how people think changed how they dealt with punishments. In fact, there's even one GCSE pod literally on that, the changing nature of punishments. See if you can find it in my playlist. Let's have a little look, because maybe you want some more. Maybe at this point you're thinking, he's talking too fast. I didn't want to make a 20-minute video. It's Friday night for a start. I would pause, go back to things if you need them. But let's have a look at what else I've got. Look, my lights have gone off. So dance around a little bit. There we go, the lights are back on. We've gone for one influence on how criminal activity dealt with was changes in society. How did the world change? And how world and Britain, how did that affect things? Well, the Reformation. This is when, remember we did Catholic, Protestant, all that sort of thing. This is why you get an increase in, say, for example, burnings at the stake, an increase in punishments of, like harshness of punishments of heretics, people who are not doing the worshipping in the correct way or committing religious crimes. It's because of changes in society. The population increase we've already talked about. The population really started increasing in the early modern period. Hue and cry and tithings, therefore, didn't work in the towns. They had to increase the role of the town constable. and you also had night watchmen and that sort of thing to try to deal with this expanding population. If you've got more people, you're going to get a higher crime rate because there's more people there who might be in a position to commit crimes. The French Revolution we've talked about, it affects not the whole 500 years, of course, but it affects the industrial period in particular. The French Revolution happened in 1789. So any time after that, that's when the ruling classes start to get nervous because they think, we don't want that to happen here. We need to control the poor. And this is why you get certain changes that we've already talked about. And one perhaps big influence after 1700 is Britain starts to get wealthy. That means that we eventually can afford a developed prison system. It's very expensive. We could afford a police force. And now we can afford all of the many things that we use now to deal with criminal activity. So the fact that our country became wealthy is one change in society which really has affected how we deal with criminal behaviour, criminal activity. And finally, you could write about technology. Now, you might notice something. I don't want to give you all the answers, but you might notice something about the technological changes. Fingerprinting, DNA, things that you've heard of, I'm sure. The police, there's all sorts of equipment that the police use now that they had no access to in the past. They're dealing with criminal activity. And punishments, which we've talked about in lesson recently. You couldn't have done that without, like keeping a database. You needed the technology to be able to keep a database of DNA, of fingerprints, of that sort of thing. So hopefully I've given you some ideas. I would go a bit deeper. I would use the GCSE pods. I would look back through your books. What are you going to write in this essay? What I haven't told you is, what do I think? What is my overall argument? What do I think had the big... That's what you've got to ask yourself. What do I think had the biggest influence on how criminal activity was dealt with? And if you're going to be a really top student, you've got to think here. This is 500 years. Perhaps it wasn't just one thing for the whole 500 years that was the most important factor. So have a really good think about that fact there. Have a really good plan of your essay. And come to me if there's anything else I can help you with to lead you down the path to being able to do this essay next week. Okay, have a great weekend. I'm going to have mine now. Thank you very much. See you later. Bye.